Hi, my name is Rebecca Straw. I'm an experimental photographer and bookmaker. I'm also the founder of Curious Publishing, a small press based in my house in Upland, California.
Where does your story begin? What moments shaped the woman you are today?
My story begins, can remember very vividly being probably like 7 years old in Pomona in my small duplex. We were right off Gibbs, and this was like the early 90s. And there was a church down the street that had this like kind of enclosed dumpster where they were just getting rid of old books. So I remember distinctly, without anyone knowing, jumping into the little ladder, jumping down, and looking at this huge pile of books that I had no idea what was going on, the text inside. I wasn't that great of a reader, not that advanced at the time, but just fell in love with all the textures and paper and binding. And I remember there was like a calculus book, and of course, I didn't understand calculus at the time, but just the graphs and line work, the pictures that accompanied it. I remember grabbing up a few books and kind of smuggling them back into my house, and then, of course, getting in trouble. Like, Rebecca, where were you? So kind of hard to explain that I had went out and found these books, but I think just for a really small age, I cared about little printed materials all around my house, photographs, texts, brochures, pamphlets, and that sort of thing. And not really having a lot of means. We didn't really go to museums, galleries. We kind of took pleasure in small things like buying a pack of blank paper and then just drawing on it in the house. And I used to make little books. I remember my first book was a simple book about a fruit bowl literally in my kitchen. So I called it Fruit Bowl in the Kitchen, and drew some pictures and just kind of identified different fruits I was taking out of the bowl. And I bound it with two little staples on the side and gave it to my mom. And I swear she probably still has it. So I think when I think of myself and my where my journey begins, it's just having just taking notice of all the small things around me, being really resourceful, and letting myself be free to kind of explore my surroundings. So I think even being the woman that I am today, I still try to embody a little girl that's just really, really curious, which is funny because that's kind of what I ended up naming my publishing company. So yeah, just kind of living through curiosity.
When did you face the fire? How did you rise from struggle with strength and grace?
I think that my life has had a series of like figurative and real fires. Not to scare anyone. I'm not a pyro. But I had a really broken household in terms of like the typical like nuclear family sense. We had very young parents. I was a middle child. um, Even though I may have not noticed it when I was really little, we were constantly struggling to find the next, rent check or what we were going to eat. I think that my mom was really good at shielding us from a lot of the dark part of adulthood and just did what she could to let us be creative and still thrive as kids. It wasn't always easy, especially when you start growing up and realizing, oh, hey, my life looks a little bit different than other people's. Um, so I tried to just stay really gritty, I think. I tried to be resourceful. I tried not to ever put myself in a place where I was othered, and tried to find like minded people no matter their background or their age. I did what I could to educate myself. And, sometimes that didn't always come in like a conventional sense. I wasn't the best kid in school. I really struggled with my attention span. I struggled with, my grades, but I think that I had a lot of mentors in my life that just kind of always kept me on a kind of straight path. um, so, I think that my childhood kind of really shaped me, not to sound too much like a cliche, but I had to grow up really fast and just kind of start providing for myself as soon as I could. So, the first fire, that I can remember is just having like a fiery passion for nature and for art. and creating. Like, I wanted to make things. I wanted to beautify my own space in my room. We all shared one bedroom as three kids that were really close in age. So decorating was a thing. We each had our own wall, and I just did what I could to take things and decorate my space. I think another fire was more of a struggle was wanting to have that freedom, but not really being able to in adolescence. So I got really into, metal music, the punk rock scene. I was living in the high desert and I just was kind of like a wild kid, just out like jumping fences and doing what I could to get into like all ages shows. Even like moshing and getting in trouble for it. Like, why do you have a black eye? you know, Mom, I was not in a fight. I was celebrating with my friends, I swear. um, and then once, adulthood comes and it creeps up on you, you're kind of put in a place where you have to start providing for yourself. So I started working and moved out really young. I moved out like as soon as I could, pretty much right when I graduated high school and rented a room. And then it was just, the boring reality of having to provide for yourself and having to kind of do away with the more creative things. I remember when I was growing up, I learned cello and violin, and one of the first things I had to do was sell my cello, so that was really hard. And that was to pay rent. So I think the the fire I'm trying to describe right now is like, you know, you're kind of like, do I put out this fire of all these bills piling up, like, or like, what do I do to keep my head on straight and kind of put a roof over my head? Um, so that was hard in my early adulthood. But another, I guess, thing that I'm thinking of when you said fire was whenever I was kind of surviving during the pandemic era, what was it, 2021? I was living with some friends in Pomona. I just got in a really terrible, toxic relationship that, I mean, I kind of felt like, okay, I put all my eggs in this basket. It failed. I know the least that I can do is try and survive and maybe create something to distract myself. So I created Curious Publishing a couple of years before that, which kind of helped me through the initial phases of the end of that relationship and then into like a new kind of era of my adulthood. I felt like, okay, the fun millennial stuff is like over. I don't care about craft cocktails right now. I can barely afford my rent. I don't know where I'm going to live. So, anyway, and then the pandemic happens. It kind of seems like it came out of nowhere. I lost half of my work and then I had to move somewhere and I moved in with some kind of new friends of mine that were also artists. And we kind of had this amazing, like, I don't know, European Renaissance life during the pandemic that we created for ourselves. We were like trying to homestead and build up like raised garden beds and cook for ourselves, trying new recipes. And then whenever we did have to go to work, those shifts didn't last very long because we were all service industry. So it's like, okay, we have like a 4-hour shift today, then we're going to come back home. I was doing a lot of book designing and keeping the nonprofit kind of afloat through Curious Publishing. And unfortunately, one of these very quiet nights in, I think it was June or July, a fire started at our house, and we're pretty lucky to have made it out alive. It was like 4 in the morning. The fire had started in the backyard, and I just remember waking up in the middle of the night from my roommate screaming my name. And all I remember is opening a door and this wall of heat hitting me and just going into full survival mode, like no emotions. Like I opened the window, I threw my cat out, I grabbed my passport. I grabbed a couple other things too. I think I put my computer like somewhere because I knew it was like my hard drive of all my like books. And I got out of the house and the fire department responded really fast, but the fire was so huge and hot that it took them a long time to put it out. And next thing you know, it's daylight and my roommates are surrounding me and we're crying, kind of in shock. And to top everything off, it was the middle of pandemic. Everyone was too afraid of touching each other, breathing on each other, like couldn't even like rely on a hug. And I'm just sitting there like, shit, like all of my shit burned down. Like, there goes all of Curious to Stock, all of my artwork. I don't know where my cat is. At least I'm alive and I'm standing on my 2 feet. And, the community surrounded me essentially. I kind of didn't hesitate. I made a GoFundMe page because I was like, holy shit, like I don't even have anything to sell. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm probably going to lose work too because I kind of have to deal with the situation. So, like, that fire, in a way, it did literally like burn all my belongings. um, but over time, I've realized that it was like this like literal and figurative cleanse in my life where I was just able to kind of put a lot of my past possessions behind me, where I lived behind me, and kind of start fresh. Like, it was kind of like the universe just decided like to pull the rug from under me. But the things that I built, like my community and the archive of like artists that I published, like all that stuff lived on because I was able to, have these gatherings, distribute things at release parties, and, relationships and conversations and stories. Those things can't be burned in a fire. So I think I like accelerated my maturity for sure. I wasn't really like fucking around anymore. I was like, okay, like this was pretty tragic. But to realize in that moment that like I am who I am because of my relationships and the stories that I've told people, like I can survive a fire and I can survive another fire. Like, it really isn't like the end all be all if I lose my possessions. So um, I have a really direct connection to fire. I've even incorporated fire into a lot of my artwork before and after the fire. So I feel like just in a like spiritual sense, it like really resonates with me. So.
How has being Latina shaped your path? In family, work, art, activism, sports, or the heart's calling?
So being a Latina, it's I'm one of those like, I don't speak Spanish. My parents were very like, okay, like we struggled so much. We don't want you to also like seem like you're, from another country. I know now that they didn't like realize that it was a bit of self-hate, a bit of assimilation. I don't think that that vocabulary existed for them. Um, so, but it was everywhere when we were growing up. I mean, we had the tamale at Christmas. All of our relatives spoke Spanish. I listened to my grandparents about their stories and when they lived in Mexico and the other families they had in Mexico and just how hard it was for them to come here. That's mainly from my mom's side. My mom's family's all from Mexico, but my dad's side he's mixed and his like Latin cultures from Cuba. So that was always intriguing to me too. I'm like, okay, I'm a bit of a mix bag. So I've never quite like landed as being like any one identity. I think I identify as very multicultural, and it's helped me kind of weave and like morph into different positions in my life, which I really enjoy. Um, but I think that this definitely, when I think about my personal connection to being Latina, I think of our strength as women. I think of our amazing food culture. I also think of the matriarchs in my family and all the sacrifice that they've had to literally bring us to this country for better opportunities. And how, when I think about how my family has kind of dispersed over time, we're not a super tight family anymore, but the aunts, the mothers, and the grandmothers, they've all kind of kept in touch, and we all kind of make sure, and check in with each other and just see how we're doing. And whenever we reconnect, it's usually over handmade tortillas, chorizo, amazing food, breakfasts, um, that sort of thing. So
What victory lights your night sky? What does it mean for you and us?
the victory that lights my night sky is that through all of my struggles in life, I think life is a continued struggle. It's a beautiful struggle that I've been able to continue to surprise myself and just grow as a human being. and continue to love and show compassion, even though life and people have not always shown me the love and compassion that maybe I deserved at the time. And I think that just shows how strong my heart is and how strong like community can really be to transform life's potential in general. And I think that that's made me into a really strong community leader and also into an artist that isn't really afraid of experimenting. I don't really see the same barriers that other people that have had a lot of structure do. And in a way, that's just like my superpower. So
When the world tried to erase you, what brought you back into your own light?
being able to reconnect to certain albums, okay, like seriously, like Radiohead, like I can listen to Radiohead still to this day, and it feels like I'm listening to it for the first time. And I think that's because whenever I was like an adolescent discovering music, on a boombox, I had a couple of Radiohead CDs. One of them was Kid A. Also, I think I had OK Computer, and there's something about like re-looping the thread through myself into being 15 or 13 years old again. That really like reminds me of who I am, um, despite time and miles of history and all the things that I've been through. I think that whenever I'm trying to find my light again, I kind of ground myself back to adolescence. And then to really, another thing that really makes me thrive is being able to learn something new. So, might sound a little basic, but I feel like I'm a perpetual student. And as long as I can continue learning, whether it's like, you know, experimental photography like cyanotype or lumen printing or new painting technique or bookbinding technique, like the kind of things that make time stand still but like go by so fast. Just like makes me like I feel like I'm like vibrating or like radiating with like power and creativity is being able to make something new or re-experience something but still be able to have like a ton of amazing emotions go through my body.
What wisdom flows from you to the next generation of Latinas?
The wisdom that I would impart on the next generation Latinas, or the wisdom that I think would echo back to past Latinas, is that um, you know, your creativity and your voice have such a huge impact on everything around you, everything and everything that's alive around you, the plants in your house, your animals, your family members, your friends. And it's such an honor to be able to make a change in a life, whether and hopefully it's a positive change. But I think it's just a huge social responsibility to have your own creativity imparted to others and then to also absorb the power of the creativity around you and what you'll do with that. So not to make this huge impossible pile of like responsibility, because I think that you can also take that in like little doses, and what you decide to do with your life, even if it's really small, as long as it's done with meaning, like will make a change and a positive impact on the world.